Ladies and gentlemen, in life, we are often told to follow our feelings. But what if I told you that our feelings are just one of many aspects of our being and not necessarily the most reliable guide? Emotions come and go, rising and falling like the tide. To base your entire existence on them is like navigating a ship by the whims of the ocean's waves. It's not the most stable course. But what happens when we realize that we don't have to be at the mercy of every emotion that arises? What happens when we choose not to be guided by fleeting feelings, but by something far deeper? Let us explore the essence of this idea to ignore your feelings not in the sense of suppression, but in the sense of recognizing that they are not the entirety of who you are. You are far more than your feelings. The mind is fickle, the heart sways with every breeze, but your inner core, the place that sees through the noise, is steady. Feelings are not permanent. They are like clouds passing through the sky, constantly shifting and changing. In one moment, you may feel elated, as if the whole world is on your side. In the next, you may feel sorrowful, as if every step you take leads you further away from peace. These emotional shifts are natural, but they are not a reflection of your true nature. The feeling of joy is just as fleeting as the feeling of sadness. They are passing moments, not lasting states of being. If you take your emotional states too seriously, you will find yourself constantly reacting to them as though they are facts or truths. But feelings are not the ultimate truth of your existence. They are responses to stimuli, external and internal, that arise and dissipate. The challenge comes when you let these fleeting moments define your actions, relationships, or sense of self. In doing so, you risk becoming a prisoner of your own emotional fluctuations. Feelings are born from thought, and thought is constantly changing. What you feel today may be entirely different tomorrow. Yesterday's sorrow may seem trivial in the light of today's happiness, and today's joy may dissolve into tomorrow's uncertainty. If you allow your decisions to be based on the feelings of the moment, you will find that your life becomes unstable, unpredictable. The deeper truth is that you are far more than your emotions. Just as the ocean remains vast and steady beneath the waves, you too possess an unchanging core that lies beneath the rise and fall of feelings. If you can remember this, you can learn to let your feelings come and go without letting them dictate your actions. Embrace the transitory nature of feelings and learn to observe them rather than be swept away by them. By accepting that feelings are temporary, you free yourself from their influence. You begin to understand that no matter how intense the emotion may be, it will not last forever. This awareness gives you the freedom to not act impulsively in moments of emotional turmoil. Instead, you can give yourself the space to reflect and respond from a place of clarity rather than reaction. Feelings may come, but they will go just as quickly, leaving you with the calm understanding that you are not bound by them. Feelings are often mistaken as the essence of who we are, but they are merely passing experiences within the vast landscape of our consciousness. They are like waves on the surface of the ocean, shifting, rising and falling, yet the ocean itself remains unchanged beneath. In the same way, your emotions are not a reflection of your true self. They are temporary responses to external or internal triggers. To identify yourself solely by your feelings is to confuse the surface waves with the depth of the ocean. When you feel joy, sorrow, anger, or fear, these emotions may seem intense and all-encompassing, but they are not the core of your being. They are just momentary states that arise, influenced by the thoughts you have or the situations you encounter. These emotional states are not you, they are the result of your mind interacting with the world around you. And just as the weather changes, so too do your feelings. One moment you may feel exhilarated, and the next you might feel deeply frustrated. But the essence of who you are remains steady through all these fluctuations. You are not the joy that comes when something goes right, nor are you the sadness that arises when things do not go as planned. These emotions come and go, but your true nature is unaffected by them. When you attach your identity to the ever-changing waves of emotion, you lose sight of the deeper, unshakable part of you. You begin to define yourself by what you feel in a given moment, which is like trying to define the ocean by a single wave. You are much more than the fleeting nature of your feelings. In truth, you are the observer of these feelings, the awareness that notices them without being consumed by them. The feelings arise and you see them, they pass and you remain. This understanding helps you detach from the constant fluctuations of emotion, allowing you to respond to life from a place of steadiness. And when you realize that your feelings are not who you are, you begin to regain control over your actions and reactions. You no longer allow yourself to be pulled around by the tides of emotion. By recognizing that your feelings are not you, you reclaim your power. You can experience the full range of human emotions without being defined by them. Anger, sadness, fear, and joy may come and go, but your deeper self remains constant, unaffected by the rise and fall of these temporary states. Your true essence is the awareness that witnesses the emotions, not the emotions themselves. Understanding this difference is key to living a life that is free from the tyranny of fluctuating feelings. You are the stillness beneath the storm. You are not the storm itself. When we are driven by our emotions, our actions often become reactive rather than intentional. In moments of intense emotion, whether joy, fear, or frustration, the impulse is to act immediately, to follow the urge of the moment. Yet, when we let our feelings dictate our actions, we may make choices that do not align with our deeper intentions or long-term goals. We may find ourselves caught in cycles of reaction where each emotional wave pushes us in a new direction, and we're left wondering why we're not making progress or achieving the things that truly matter. To take action beyond feelings means choosing not to be governed by the transitory states of emotion, but to act from a place of clarity and conscious awareness. This is not about denying or suppressing the emotions that arise, rather it's about recognizing that emotions are not always the best source for decision making. When we rise above the emotional state, we begin to access a deeper intelligence that guides us through life with purpose and stability, independent of the ever-changing landscape of our feelings. In moments of emotional intensity, the first step is to pause. This simple act of stepping back creates the space necessary to observe the emotion without letting it dictate our next move. It allows us to see the emotion for what it is, just a passing phenomenon rather than a definitive guide for how to act. In that pause, we have the opportunity to connect with our deeper intentions, our true desires, and our long-term vision. We can make decisions that are grounded in wisdom and clarity rather than in the whims of momentary feelings. This kind of action, beyond feelings, requires discipline. It requires the willingness to go beyond the impulse of the moment and ask, is this action aligned with who I want to be and what I want to create in my life? It's about moving with a sense of purpose even when the emotional tide pulls in the opposite direction. Taking action beyond feelings is about not allowing yourself to be swept away by the highs and lows of emotion, but rather standing firm in your intention and responding to life with a steady hand, regardless of what feelings may arise. Often, we may feel the need to act out of frustration, sadness, or excitement, but these emotional states can cloud our judgment. By stepping back and considering the bigger picture, we can make decisions that are more thoughtful and effective. Sometimes, the best course of action is to do nothing until we are clear. This pause is not a sign of indecision, but a sign of strength and wisdom. Strength to resist the urge to act impulsively, and wisdom to recognize that true power lies in being able to act from a place of inner clarity, not from the whims of emotional impulses. When we take action beyond our feelings, we are no longer slaves to the emotional ups and downs that may have previously dictated our lives. We begin to create from a deeper, more aligned place. Actions taken with clarity and intention have more lasting power. They move us in the direction of our deeper goals, and they allow us to maintain our sense of integrity even when emotions seek to distract us. In essence, taking action beyond feelings allows us to break free from the cycle of emotional reaction and begin living from a place of conscious creation. It's about moving through life with purpose and direction, not at the mercy of fleeting emotional states. It's about understanding that while emotions are a natural part of the human experience, they are not the foundation upon which we build our lives. By acting beyond feelings, we begin to live with a deeper sense of fulfillment and alignment, knowing that every choice we make is a reflection of our highest intentions, not the result of transient emotional states. Feelings often emerge in response to the external world, influenced by what happens around us or the thoughts we entertain. Yet, emotions are not necessarily accurate reflections of reality. They are often shaped by our perceptions, which can be distorted, incomplete, or subjective. A fleeting feeling of fear, for instance, might not always be based on actual danger, but on an overactive imagination or a past experience that clouds our judgment. Similarly, feelings of frustration or anger may arise from miscommunication or misunderstandings, not from a true sense of injustice. In these moments, the emotions we experience can be powerful, but they are not necessarily telling us the truth. It's easy to assume that our emotions are valid expressions of reality after all. We feel them so intensely, but they are shaped by many factors beyond the truth of a situation. Often we feel a certain way simply because of how our mind has framed an event, how it interprets the circumstances. Emotions can mislead us into reacting to an idea rather than to the actual situation. For instance, when we feel anger towards someone, it might be rooted not in their behavior, but in our own unresolved issues or in how we perceive their actions based on past experiences. The feeling, though powerful, is not an objective measure of the event. It is merely an emotional reaction shaped by the mind's interpretation. In this way, feelings can lead us to make judgments that are not grounded in reality. We may think that someone dislikes us because we feel ignored in a conversation, or we may assume that a situation is hopeless because we feel overwhelmed. But when we act on these emotions without questioning their origin or validity, we risk making decisions that are based on distorted perceptions rather than on objective truth. What we feel in a moment is not always an accurate reflection of what is really going on, and when we fail to acknowledge this, we often act in ways that do not serve our best interests. Feelings can also be influenced by our internal biases and unresolved emotional states. If we carry unresolved pain or disappointment, we may interpret neutral events through the lens of our past experiences, giving rise to emotions that seem real in the moment but are not based on the present reality. For example, if someone is overly sensitive about criticism because of past trauma, a simple piece of constructive feedback may trigger an intense emotional reaction, even though the feedback itself is neither harsh nor unfair. The feeling in such a case is misleading because it is more about the unresolved emotional residue from the past than about the present situation. This is why it's essential to recognize that emotions, though valid in their existence, are not always reliable guides. They often reflect our state of mind and our inner stories rather than the true nature of external events. The more we identify with these emotions as truth, the more we risk misjudging situations, acting impulsively, or making choices that later feel misguided. By giving in to the immediacy of emotion, we lose sight of the broader picture, of the deeper truth that may be obscured by a momentary emotional reaction. The key is to realize that feelings are not the full picture. They can be informative and are part of the human experience, but they are not the entire truth. The skill lies in pausing, in taking a step back to observe the emotion without immediately reacting to it. In doing so, we create the space necessary to discern whether the feeling is truly aligned with the present reality or if it is shaped by old wounds, fears, or misconceptions. Only then can we make decisions that are based on clarity, not clouded by misleading emotions. Feelings can also be driven by social pressures or external expectations. For example, we may feel a sense of inadequacy because we believe we are not living up to society's standards of success, even if in reality we are living a fulfilling life according to our own values. Similarly, we may feel guilt because we believe we should be doing something different, even though the decision we made was right for us at the time. These feelings, while powerful, are shaped by external forces and may not reflect our true desires or values. They are misleading because they align with external standards, not with our inner truth. In the end, feelings can be incredibly misleading if we allow them to dictate our perceptions of reality. They can color our judgment, cloud our understanding, and lead us to act in ways that are not in our best interest. By learning to question our emotional responses, to recognize when they are based on past experiences, biases, or external influences, we begin to regain clarity. We start to understand that feelings, while valuable in their own right, are not always an accurate reflection of what is true in the moment. They are signals, not facts. By observing them without immediate reaction, we can navigate life more wisely, with greater understanding of both ourselves and the world around us. The mind is the root of our experience. It shapes how we perceive the world, how we react to situations, and how we interpret the events that unfold around us. Emotions arise from the mind, but they are often uncontrollable if we allow them to run unchecked. The mind, when left uncontrolled, is like a wild animal, darting from thought to thought, creating scenarios that may never occur, exaggerating fears, amplifying desires, and spinning stories that fuel emotional responses. It is not the emotions themselves that create turmoil, but the unchecked mind that gives them power. If we can learn to control the mind, we gain the ability to maintain a steady and grounded presence, unaffected by the emotional storms that might otherwise arise. When we are governed by our emotions, it is as if we are riding the waves of an ocean with no anchor. The emotions push us in one direction and then pull us in another, and we become helpless, subject to the ebb and flow of feelings that seem to arise out of nowhere. The emotional experience is intense and overwhelming, but it is the mind that gives it fuel. The mind attaches itself to the emotion, amplifying its intensity, adding layers of stories, justifications, and explanations that make the feeling seem all the more real. The mind tells us this is who I am in this moment, or this is the way the world is, when in fact the emotion is merely a passing cloud, one that would dissipate if left alone without the mind's constant feeding of it. True control comes when we turn our attention inward and focus on the mind rather than trying to suppress or deny our emotions. Emotions are natural and cannot be ignored, but they are not the entirety of our experience. The mind creates and sustains the emotional experience by attaching labels, meanings, and judgments. If we can step back from the emotional reaction and witness it without judgment, without identifying with it, we begin to free ourselves from its grip. The key is not to suppress the emotions, but to understand that they are not who we are and that they do not need to define our actions. When the mind is in control, it has the ability to observe emotions without becoming consumed by them. Just as a cloud can pass through the sky without altering the vast expanse above it, emotions can arise and pass without changing the deeper state of awareness within us. It is the uncontrolled mind that attaches to these fleeting emotions, inflating them, turning them into something personal, something that needs to be acted upon. But when we have control over the mind, we create space between the emotion and the reaction. This space allows us to observe the emotion without letting it drive our behavior. To control the mind is to recognize that thoughts and emotions are transient. The mind often clings these feelings, weaving them into a narrative that seeks to explain or justify them. If we attach too strongly to these stories, we become trapped in an emotional cycle. However, when we control the mind, we become aware of the transient nature of both thoughts and emotions. We begin to realize that just as a feeling arises, it will also fade away. We don't need to attach meaning to every emotion that passes through us. We don't need to give it power over us. The mind, when untethered, will chase after every fleeting emotion, believing it is real and permanent. But the moment we take control, we understand that nothing is permanent, not even the emotion itself. The mind can either be our greatest ally or our greatest adversary. When we allow it to run unchecked, it creates unnecessary conflict, fueling our emotional reactions and steering us toward impulsive, often regrettable actions. But when we choose to observe the mind, when we choose to direct it rather than be directed by it, we regain mastery over our experience. We stop being victims of our own thoughts and emotions, and instead we start living with intentionality, grounded in a deeper awareness that does not waver with the rise and fall of temporary emotional states. The real power lies not in controlling emotions directly, but in understanding that emotions are the result of the mind's engagement with them. If we control the mind, we prevent it from creating stories around the emotions that distort our perception and increase their intensity. The mind's tendency to ruminate, to dwell on past events or imagine future outcomes only amplifies emotional states. But when the mind is trained to remain still, to observe without reacting, emotions lose their grip on us. We experience the emotion, but we are not overwhelmed by it. The emotion passes and the mind returns to its natural state of calm, not holding on to the residue of what has just passed. When we learn to control the mind, we stop reacting to emotions as if they are the ultimate truth of our experience. Instead of being swept away by a wave of anger or sadness, we stand as the observer, recognizing that the emotion is a momentary experience, not a permanent part of us. We may feel fear, but we don't need to act out of it. We may feel joy, but we don't need to chase after it. By controlling the mind, we create the space to respond to life with clarity, rather than reacting impulsively based on momentary emotional states. In this space, true freedom lies freedom from the control of fleeting feelings and the ability to make decisions that are aligned with a deeper sense of purpose and truth. Freedom lies in detachment, but detachment is not about renouncing life or withdrawing from the world. It is not a form of escapism or indifference to the experiences that life offers. Rather, true freedom arises when we learn to detach ourselves from the constant need to identify with our thoughts, emotions, and the outcomes of our actions. Detachment is the ability to observe life without becoming entangled in it, to experience life fully without being bound by it. In this state, we free ourselves from the mental and emotional attachments that create suffering and limitations. When we are attached to something, whether it is an idea, person, an outcome, or even an emotion, we create a subtle form of bondage. Attachment comes from the desire to hold on to something that gives us a sense of comfort or security. We identify ourselves with certain aspects of life, such as our possessions, our relationships, or even our successes and failures, and in doing so, we tie our sense of self to these external things. The problem arises when these things are no longer within our control, or when they change and we are left feeling lost, unsettled, or dissatisfied. Detachment is the ability to experience life without allowing our sense of peace and contentment to depend on anything outside of us. The attachment to outcomes is one of the greatest sources of stress and anxiety. When we become fixated on achieving a particular result, we begin to identify with that outcome as if it will define us. If we succeed, we feel validated, but if we fail, we feel as though our worth is diminished. This attachment to success or failure creates a roller coaster of emotional highs and lows. But true freedom comes when we are no longer bound by these external results. We learn to act with intention and effort, but we do not attach our happiness or sense of fulfillment to the outcome. We let go of the need for everything to unfold in a certain way and allow life to unfold as it will. Similarly, attachment to emotions can create a cycle of suffering. When we identify with our emotions, believing them to be permanent or indicative of our true self, we become entangled in them. We may feel overwhelmed by anger, sadness, or fear, allowing these emotions to shape our identity and dictate our actions. Detachment from emotions does not mean suppressing or ignoring them, but rather recognizing that they are temporary states passing like clouds across the sky. We can experience an emotion without becoming it, allowing ourselves to feel deeply without allowing those feelings to define our actions or sense of self. Detachment also frees us from the grip of past experiences and future expectations. Often our attachments are not just to present circumstances, but also to memories of the past or projections into the future. We may be attached to the way things used to be or the way we hope they will be. These attachments create a constant sense of longing or regret, preventing us from fully engaging with the present moment. When we detach from the past and the future, we create space to experience life as it is, without the burden of what has been or the anxiety of what is yet to come. In this state of detachment, we begin to experience life in its purest form, free from the distortions of memory and expectation. Detachment allows us to break free from the need to control everything around us. The desire for control is deeply rooted in attachment, the belief that we must manipulate and shape the world to fit our desires. This need for control creates tension and stress as we constantly strive to impose our will on the flow of life. Detachment, on the other hand, is the recognition that there are many things beyond our control. It is the wisdom to know what can be changed and what must be accepted. When we detach from the need for control, we allow life to unfold naturally, trusting that whatever happens is part of the larger flow of existence. In relationships, detachment can be particularly liberating. Attachment to people often leads to dependence, possessiveness, and expectations, which can create tension and conflict. When we learn to love without attachment, we free ourselves and the other person from the burden of unrealistic expectations. True love is not about holding on, but about allowing others to be as they are without trying to change or control them. When we detach from the need for validation or approval from others, we can engage in relationships from a place of genuine connection and compassion, not from a place of need or fear. Detachment also means letting go of the constant need to define ourselves through external labels and roles. We often become attached to the roles we play in life, whether as a parent, a professional, a friend, or a partner, and we begin to derive our identity from these roles. While these roles are important, they do not define our true essence. Detaching from these external identities allows us to connect with our deeper, unchanging self, the part of us that is not bound by any label or definition. In this space of detachment, we experience the freedom to be fully ourselves without the pressure to conform to societal expectations or personal attachments. When we detach from the need for approval, control, and attachment to outcomes, we experience a profound sense of inner peace. We no longer feel like we are at the mercy of external circumstances or emotional fluctuations. We become anchored in the present moment, able to face life's challenges with equanimity, knowing that no matter what happens, we are not defined by it. Detachment allows us to navigate life with grace and wisdom, free from the burdens of attachment and the limitations they impose. It is in this freedom that we discover our true power and potential. In the end, the key to living a life of peace and fulfillment lies in the understanding that we are not our feelings, not the fluctuations of our mind, and not the attachments we form. True freedom comes from the ability to detach from the transient emotions and external circumstances that seek to define us. When we stop allowing our emotions and thoughts to control us, when we learn to observe them without identification or reaction, we can begin to live from a place of clarity and intentionality. This freedom is not about escaping life, but about embracing it fully without becoming entangled in the ups and downs that come with it. By gaining control over the mind, choosing actions that are aligned with our deeper self, and letting go of the need to attach ourselves to outcomes or emotions, we create space for a life of genuine peace, purpose, and inner strength. We start to understand that life is a flow, and we are not victims of it, but participants in it, choosing to move with it rather than against it. In this space of detachment, we experience the depth of our true being, unshaken by the constant changes of the external world. It is in this place of stillness that we find our true freedom, the freedom to be who we truly are, not defined by the transitory experiences of life, but anchored in the unwavering presence of our own awareness. This is where real peace is found, not in controlling the world around us, but in learning to live with it, free from the chains of attachment and illusion.